Hey everybody, welcome back to Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. Thanks for joining us on our YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you haven't. And we're going to get a look at our flock of broilers. We're raising Cornish rock cross meat chickens. They're 33 days old today. We're going to take a look at them in this video. Try to get the camera right down there on their level so you get a bird's eye view of them, get an idea of the size that they are and some of their behaviors in their grower pen here. And we'll talk about their feed consumption. So got a little update on that with this flock. If you have any questions or observations you want to share with us, please put them in comments. And as you're watching the video, I hope you'll interact with it. Give it a like with a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you don't like it. Either way, we appreciate you being here. Thanks for the time and effort that you're sharing to support our channel just by watching. Please share it with your friends. So we just show you how we raise meat chickens and produce poultry here, and with our YouTube channel we're able to reach out and share some of our farm life and sometimes even our day-to-day life with viewers. So this group of chickens is 33 days old, and so almost 5 weeks old, and we raise our meat chickens to about 6 weeks old. There's kind of a lot of puzzle pieces involved in producing poultry, and so for us, we actually get our chickens from a hatchery. So on the front end of a flock, we work with a hatchery to get the chicks ordered and get them shipped here on a specific date. And then on the finishing end of our flock, we work with a USDA inspected processor. So, you know, we have to have that appointment set up way ahead of time, have a processing appointment for our birds. So in the course of planning for these flocks, we have to get all of that to work together. And we basically start from the finishing end and go backwards. We got to get a processing appointment set up. And then we know that we want to raise the birds 6 weeks, so we count backward from the processing appointment to determine the hatching dates that we want. And then we network with the hatchery to get the birds hatched and shipped to us when we want to start the flock. So, and we actually did all of that for 7 flocks for the entire year of 2023. We did that the first week of January in 2023. So that's why I said it's like a lot of puzzle pieces. For us in our operation, we had about 1,350 birds scheduled for the entire year. So this flock has 299 in it now. When this flock finishes, that'll finish up about 1,250 birds that we've started. Most of them, you know, make it through production and make it to processing. So about 1,250 birds that we have raised so far in 2023 as of this flock, and then 100 more to do this fall. But with having all that to coordinate, you know, it's a lot to put together. And so that's why we have a kind of a set schedule that the birds are raised on, where we say, you know, we raise them 6 weeks. But obviously, you know, if the hatchery needs the date shifted, you know, 2 or 3 days one direction, or if the processor needs a date shifted 2 or 3 days one direction, when we're in the planning stage, then, you know, we go with what they have available. And in general, our experience is the hatchery stays on schedule and the processor stays on schedule. So therefore we have to also stay on schedule with accepting the flocks and raising the flocks and finishing the flocks. So if you actually could raise the chickens yourself and process them yourself, and that gives you a little more flexibility. If you plan a flock like for 6 weeks and then you decide maybe you want to raise them to 7 or 8 weeks, then you could do that if you are processing your own birds. But when you're working with a processor, you really don't have that flexibility. And would also like to say, and we've said this in other videos, but the way we raise the birds works for us. It's not the only way to raise meat chickens. You certainly can use other approaches, and we really feel like if we can do it, anybody can do it. It takes a little bit of research, a little bit of trial and error, and a little bit of just sticking with it. But if you want to raise your own chicken, it's certainly something that is doable. You can do it right at your own home place. And for smaller flocks, you know, you really don't have to have a huge space to do it. I mean, you can see our birds. We've got 299 in here in an area that's about 20 foot by 25 foot. Their entire building is 30 foot by 30 foot, but we're using a little bit of the perimeter for it, for their feed storage and storage of the bedding material that we put down in the pen here. So they're confined to about 20 foot by 25 foot. So, you know, if like for us, we've pretty well determined if we were raising just for our household, we might just want to raise like 75 to 100 chickens for a year. We could do that in one flock. We could do that inside this building, self-contained in here. And then if you even were willing to process them yourself, you could just raise them and process them when you decide they're ready for processing. It's best to plan that out ahead and kind of have it built into your schedule. But, you know, just the point that this isn't the only way to do it. We share these practices here because regardless of how many birds you raise at a time or what approach you use, you can take a lot of these concepts and management practices and scale them to the numbers that you need to. But also, you know, just to encourage people that if we can do it, probably anybody can do it, and you can utilize a lot of the management practices that we do share on here. So looking back at these guys, we do want to talk a little bit about the target feed consumption range. And we've talked about that in other videos, but we had something kind of interesting happen with our flock. We basically have a reference point with any of our birds that we expect to be able to finish a meat chicken on 10 pounds of feed per bird on average. So when we're going to raise a flock, we take 10, as in the 10 pounds of the feed per bird, and we multiply 10 by the number of birds that we're going to order in that flock. And that's how many pounds of feed we expect to feed out for the entire flock for the 6 weeks that we're going to raise them. So like in this case, we had ordered 300 chicks. So we multiplied that by 10, so we expect to feed 3,000 pounds of feed over 6 weeks to this flock of chickens. So then as they're starting and growing, we pay attention and document how much feed we're distributing, like over the first week and over the second week. And then we just kind of use that and figure out some math formulas in our head to apply to how much feed we have and what rate they're consuming it at and pacing it to make it last for the production time. So these birds basically came to a point where they were eating 100 pounds of feed every 24 hours. And that was working great, and they were very satisfied. And then over the last couple days, ambient temperature conditions have been ideal. And what we find with meat birds in particular, this doesn't really apply to other kinds of birds necessarily, or even other kinds of meat birds other than Cornish rock cross meat chickens, but what we find is when conditions are ideal, they consume more, they eat more, they drink more. And that's because when they're cold, they're kind of huddling together. They're not wanting to get up and move, so they're not going to food and they're not going to water. Conversely, when conditions are hot, they become even more sedentary than they naturally are already, and they stay still to conserve energy, and they're not going to food and they're not going to water. So when conditions are ideal, they're going to food and going to water more and moving around a little more. And they naturally rest a lot because they're growing so rapidly. So rest is important because that's when we grow, right? Every living thing. So anyway, so they were eating 100 pounds of food every 24 hours. Then we had a couple days of like ideal conditions, and we had a day where we went ahead and put in 200 pounds of feed in the same day because they had consumed the first 100 in about 13 hours, and they were ready for more food, so we added in another 100. And so we're letting them kind of eat all those trays down empty and see if they kind of pace back to getting through to tomorrow morning for day 34 on the food that's in the pen, and then that'll put them back on track. And that's where our target feed consumption range comes in. We know how much we expect them to eat, and they should be able to be finished on that, so we try to keep them on that. And it looks like they're going to get back on track, but they were eating good the last couple days.